You guys know this meme, right? I know it's meant to be played up as a joke, but I honestly think it's painfully accurate and relatable. SpongeBob as a character symbolizes maintained mental youth and childlike wonder in so many of his starring episodes. I like this about him, though. I'm a sort of social, partway through high school, autism spectrum teenager, and I frequently find myself surrounded by more popular people, or doing more adult things than I do all the time, like jobs or honors classes or other things that aren't worth worrying about, but I do all the time. Sometimes I wonder what it means to have to grow up. SpongeBob, despite being 37 years old, has the life of a 16-year-old, and he's an even younger soul. He works at a fast food joint, takes driving lessons, and hangs out with his friends whenever he gets a chance. This isn't a bad lifestyle in itself. SpongeBob gets by like a champ, even in spite of the, let's be honest, relatively samey and generic life he's had for years. For as much as SpongeBob's heart is in the right place, he fixates on his good intentions so much that it gets in the way of him reading into social cues. Look, I don't get why so many parents don't let their kids watch SpongeBob. Like, what's offensive? Maybe they don't always say stuff their parents want to hear, but kids don't have attention spans, so characters' actions speak louder than words to them. SpongeBob was always very compassionate, and I'd like to think that influenced me for the better. You may think this show is just inoffensive and not meant to have its characters critically analyzed. You're right. However, SpongeBob is a great representative of multiple common intellectual disabilities. SpongeBob is a people pleaser with ADHD, autism, and optimism bias, but a people pleaser with ADHD, autism, and optimism bias who uses those things to their advantage and refuses to let any of that get him down. Am I delusional? Well, yes, but stay with me. SpongeBob is a flawed individual. Some people love him, and some people hate his guts, with both opinions stemming from valid reasoning. Does having haters make SpongeBob a bad person? Not at all. Honestly, his heart being in the right place makes him the kind of guy we need more of in the world. He can be such an optimist in the worst of times, which isn't always a good thing. See, this is where that optimism bias comes in. Optimism bias is easily the most obscurely known of SpongeBob's intellectual disabilities, but it contributes to the others. In case you didn't know, optimism bias is known as an unreasonably good expectation as opposed to the outcome. SpongeBob can't always read the room, but he always feels like his best efforts will accomplish something great. They say hope for the best but expect the worst, but SpongeBob always keeps his hopes up so high that his expectations are influenced by them. A good example of SpongeBob not only getting his hopes up too high, but also struggling to maintain focus and getting a little socially awkward, is in Season 2, Episode 17A, Procrastination. SpongeBob has an essay to write for boating school. No other students are enthusiastic about it, but SpongeBob is just like, what not to do at a stoplight? 800 words minimum, yay! He goes in expecting not necessarily a walk in the park, but a fun time. Turns out, writing an essay isn't all gumdrops and rainbows. Did you know that the brain loves color? This can be especially true for those with ADHD and or autism. Stripped down to the bare essentials, the brain craves a little variety in both the experiences it lives through and the content it consumes. So for people with ADHD especially, but at this point in time basically anyone because, you know, attention span, but literal black and white essays look like walls of text. SpongeBob falls victim to this common plague very quickly. He tries to be productive, but literally anything is more appealing to his brain. He takes his sweet time working on the little details of the essay just because that seems more attainable, and then is raring to take long breaks in between. This is a problem with a lot of schools. Unrealistic deadlines and expectations. 800 words seem like a daunting task with the limited time of just one night. I didn't write this whole script in that amount of time, no siree. Often when I start writing, I get on a roll pretty fast. However, that's because I enjoy writing. It's definitely not for everyone though. So to not only assign the task of writing a whole essay, but to measure out exactly how long it has to be at least, can make the job seem even more daunting just from the looks of it. Giving people exact numbers, whether it be what time to show up for an event for, or how long something is going to take, can often decrease their patience, as they'll be itching for a specific time or trying to do something XYZ amount of times, to where it just becomes a countdown, or count up, it depends. SpongeBob is ultimately disappointed about the task at hand, because he went in with a little more excitement than an essay probably warranted. Now, is working on this essay actually going to benefit him? You would think so, because he'll probably get a good grade, should he finish it on time, but really, no. Productivity isn't just work. Productivity is work that you know you're pouring thought and effort into. SpongeBob didn't even know what to write going in, so how is he supposed to be productive? He's not going to, but that's not his fault. He's a neurodivergent guy, but that's just how one is born. It's not good for him to get stuck on this one thing, which at the end of the day is just a small blip on everyone's radar. Despite what the American education system may have you think, toxic productivity exists. No one should fear reaching out to a teacher for an extension if they don't have the time or energy for their work as it is. Everyone has different learning needs, so school shouldn't have to be as hard as it is. Unfortunately though, SpongeBob doesn't exactly have access to his teacher while he's writing his essay on paper from home, or the knowledge of what's good for his academic career as opposed to his mind and body, or even which is better for him in the long run. But if nothing else, He can kind of feel that writing an essay is difficult. He may take breaks that are longer than they ought to be, but he never actually calls it quits on the essay or officially decides when is a better time to work on it. He never says "f*** off, Puff" and burns his paper to ashes. It's written in SpongeBob's personality that he refuses to ever let anyone down. He's not intentionally ignoring his homework like you do. He just feels the need for a healthy distraction here and there. He calls Patrick while he's sleeping, and he feeds Gary when he really doesn't need it. Both Patrick and Gary are trying to tell him nicely that he should probably get writing, but SpongeBob can't take the hint that they honestly don't want his attention. Isn't getting distracted fun? Overall, I'd place SpongeBob in the combination of hyperactive and inattentive ADHD. We see from the procrastination episode that SpongeBob's attention span is very short, but there are a lot of other cases where his energy is heightened at the wrong times. I'm tired and I don't want to elaborate on the ADHD thing any further, so just take the footage on screen and let's move on. We've been over ADHD, but how about autism? Autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, while it's not a disease, is probably broader than you think. It is defined as, and I quote, a developmental disorder caused by differences in the brain. If that sounds really broad, good. I already kinda tapped into SpongeBob's struggle to read into social cues, but this is perhaps his most prominent autistic trait. He can't usually tell when he's annoying Squidward, and he quite literally always wants to help out in any way he can. In Are You Happy Now, he tries to give Squidward a happy memory, but he tries too hard to rush a natural process. It's played up for laughs, but it's also a lot of bull that the episode expects me to believe that Squidward has no happy memories. It's a shit episode. My point is that it doesn't really help Squidward, and it makes the episode even more insufferable. That's not all though. There are multiple occasions where he's even helped Plankton. You know, the guy who spent years trying to run his boss out of business and by extension put him out of the job he's very passionate about? Crazy as it may seem, this is never an intentional betrayal of Krabs. In the Season 6 episode Single Cell Anniversary, SpongeBob tries to help Plankton find an anniversary gift for Karen, and in Season 11's Karen's Virus, Plankton asks him politely to go inside his wife, why did I say it that way, to remove the titular virus she has, and dang it, he goes with it. He's genuinely sympathetic for Plankton about these problems, but this is because he doesn't like to be a guy who causes conflict. He can't stand to have enemies because to him, love makes the dang world go round. He's usually smart enough to know when Plankton is at it again to steal the formula, but he always means well whenever he wants to help. This is what makes SpongeBob a people pleaser. Not to mention, there are things he'll hyperfixate on regardless of where his attention span skews. He has a pretty routine life, so a lot of the time his brain will hyperfocus entirely on one of those things. Be it flipping patties, jellyfishing, singing the Goofy Goober song, or as I mentioned above, trying to help his friends, even if the friendship is one-sided. Not that this is a bad thing. Again, it really depends on the situation. Does SpongeBob have a sociotropic personality? Probably. Sociotropy is defined as excessive investment in interpersonal relationships, to an extent where it becomes damaging, or the person in question forgets about their own needs because they worry that much more about others than themselves. Yes indeed, SpongeBob cares a lot about those he considers his friends. Sometimes too much. Sure, he has his own wants and needs, as with anyone, but luckily for him, helping out his friends is not a distraction from his own problems or anything. It's just his way of filling his own cup. He may not always be doing the right thing or taking the right action, but he tries his best, and that's the best anyone can do. Sorta like me, I suppose. SpongeBob is definitely neurodivergent, but this hasn't stopped him once. Okay, in fairness, it probably has once or twice. I don't know. SpongeBob may be wide-eyed, fun-loving, and sometimes overly optimistic well into adulthood, but one should never feel too old to not think but know that every problem has a solution. It's easy for the harsh reality of life to get people down, but this is why we need people in the world who always want to spread smiles. Arguably, the reason SpongeBob never lets his ADHD or autism get him down is because he doesn't know he has them. But even if he did know what his limits were, why should he? Even if you aren't giving people exactly what they need in spite of your best efforts, it's never wrong to want to support someone. Since I was young, SpongeBob was a character who really resonated with me. I wanted to be like him. And here I am today, breaking down that notion and marveling over what a compassionate guy SpongeBob really is. I still relate to this guy, even as someone who knows he's neurodivergent, and in what ways. But I know that's out of my control, and lots of people already love me, so why should I hate myself for any of that? Please know that this applies to you too. For as many people as we may annoy with our own personalities, that's their loss. There's a bunch more who appreciate you just for being yourself and meaning well. As you give your love and support to those around you, so too will those people come back to help you, love you, celebrate you. We are all the heroes of our own stories. And even if you might not feel that sense of heroism in yourself, that is exactly why SpongeBob SquarePants is the kind of flawed individual we should all strive to be a little more like.
My baseball stitches are so small, they're practically invisible. And I can read and write witch tongue in 5 different dialects. Also, I can sit so perfectly still that woodland creatures come and sit on me. But I guess none of this is gonna matter on the SATs.